Are we there? Excuse me. Good morning. How is everybody? The bright and early crew here. So we are going to get started on this special council meeting this morning, and I think I've asked Randy Haverfield. Do you mind opening us in prayer, Randy?
Be happy to.
Thank you. Let's stand and open in prayer and do the pledge.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm going to share a little bit of a prayer that was from the Idaho Prayer Breakfast. That's okay.
Yeah.
Dear Lord, we give you thanks for this unique place called Nampa, its people, its geography, its beauty. We ask that we will be a place where you are invited to be at work each day through each of us as we love our neighbor, nurture our children, provide for one another's well-being, care for your creation, and seek to be fruitful in doing good. Hear our prayer, Lord. Empower us to be examples who honor you. As we go from here, may we shine your light in this dark world. May our service cause people to flourish and bring glory to God. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, Randy. And Doug, you can go ahead. You're first on, so I'll let you move on down and be ready, and we'll do roll call.
Rodriguez. Jingula.
Here via Teams.
Bills.
Yes.
Reynolds.
Here.
Haverfield.
Here.
Griffin. 2 absent.
I guess, okay, that's right. Okay. Okay, so today we are having a workshop. It's our standard workshop format with a number of different discussion items. And the first discussion presentation is our CFO, Doug Racine, and he's going to be discussing our budget process. So this is a good opportunity for us to get ready to go as we're digging into the budget. Doug, thank you for all your work. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. Let me share this file. This is a copy of the file that I put on each of your desks. I don't know if I gave one to our legal, but they're welcome to have a copy. All right. Some of you, most of you had a chance to deal with me in the past. Councilor Haverfield and I've been through at least 5 budgets, probably 6 budget sessions by now. But I wanted to spend some time talking about a changing dynamic in our budgeting process. I think it's been said that if you don't move forward, you're standing still, if you're standing still, you're going backwards. So we're trying to move forward all the time in how we develop the process and how we grow it and how we respond to the changing dynamic of the budgetary budgetary process. So with a little bit of humor, there are 3 types of accountants: those who can count and those who can't.
So we don't have the presentation yet.
It's
so
on.
let's.
I've shared it. It's not shared? Let me try sharing again.
We really don't want to miss that piece, Doug.
Okay, share. Boom. Not that one. Stop presenting. Try it again. And get to. There we go. And the presentation mode. There we go. All right, yeah. So this is, again, my say it again, there are 3 types of accountants: those who can count and those who can't. You gotta think about it for a second. Right, okay. Now, I've been tempted to do this right here as we get to our budget process. If we get to all our budget goals and we actually succeed, we cut the costs we need to, We reinforce budgetary needs where need to. I may just actually challenge everybody that I'll come and do a Gangnam-style dance in City Hall if we meet all of our requirements and we get the actual process done right and we've met everybody's satisfaction. I may just throw that as a challenge to everybody. Then
I bet it was the shoes that
shoes, yeah.
caught you on this picture, if I were going to guess.
I'll get some black and white shoes. There we go. All right, and that's enough of the lightning mood. Let's go on to some of the important things. We're limited time. We as a city operate under the modified accrual basis. We don't operate as a business. We don't record accruals for revenues we have not received or expenses we have not incurred. But because we have property taxes coming in after we've set the budgets, we have this modified accrual basis. But what are our resources and how should we allocate them? That's one of the biggest challenges that I look at when we try to do the budget process, when we look at our property taxes, our shared revenues, franchise fees, other capital funds. How do we allocate them out and how are they best used? And one of the things that I'd like to focus more on is bringing up this process with counselors so that you can help guide, drive, design the future of the city, because that's what you're doing on most council nights. You're talking about housing, high-density housing and low-density places. You guide that process so that the city has this growth that looks the same. I'd like to do the same with the finances as we go forward. But here's a recap of how our funding works. And this might be of more interest for Sebastian and maybe a refresher for Councilor Bills, or Councilor Griffin and Councilor Bills. But we have, the way our tax base works based on a statutory principle is we can take the highest of the last 3 years of our tax base, and that becomes the base for the next year, so the highest of the last 3 years. So think about what that means if there's an economic fall off. If the economy falls off really drastically, our tax base, the base, won't fall for 3 years. New construction will go down, annexation fees will go down, but the base will stay the same for 3 years. And then as we go past that third year, then we start losing ground. But it gives us a stable platform. Now, we also have a 3% statutory limit applied to the base. That's the limit of what we can add on to our budget for the year. There are 2 other options to that. Well, 3 actually. You can, by law, take 1% of statutory limit of the foregone for operations. We've never done that, and I'm not right now proposing we do. I'm just informing you of what the statutory law allows. If you do choose that 1%, it rolls into your base the next year, so it sticks with you in perpetuity. You can also choose 3% of the statutory limit from foregone for capital costs, so a one year capital investment. 3% for us is about, give or take, $1.2 million. So you could, if you had a capital need, you could bring 3% in, $1.2 million, spend it. That does not roll over. It's one-time use, and it goes away. Now, we've got $4.4 million in foregone just for reference. Then we have the new construction and annex properties added to the tax rolls. It's not a tax increase, it's just new properties coming on the tax roll. Now, this is where 389 comes into play. 389 takes and makes us estimate our next year's levy rate and applies it to the anticipated tax rolls for the new construction, and that's where we get the new construction. Last year, I'll go through this in a minute. Last year, we had about $1.2 million in 3%, and we had about $1.15 million in new construction. So 2.3, a little over, that was our total increase. And I'll get to that in more detail in a minute. We're not going to make that much this year. It's going to be less because the new construction is down at least 30% from where it's at the high of the prior year. But before I go on, the other funds we have are state shared funds. General sales taxes, these are budgeted for '24, $10.88 million, and liquor sales tax, $1.25 million. Liquor has stabilized at about the 1.25. It won't go up down much. There was a legislation that matured in '24 that was diverting 2% per year to another state fund. That has ceased, but the growth, there was a tremendous growth in the liquor sales taxes, particularly during COVID. I guess people needed something to do, and they bought a lot of liquor. But it's stabilizing now. Highway distribution revenues, I'm going to get into this a little more later, but $8.5 million. There were at least 3 bills in the state legislature that were driving funds to this, the $8.5 million in highway distributed revenues. One of those was a 2-year distribution that was scheduled to give $1.8 million in '23 and $2.4 million in '24. That's a limited life, 2 years only. It was budgeted for in '24, but it will go away in '25 unless there's something new coming out of JFAC I don't know about. Road and bridge tax of 2.7 that comes to the county. And then grants and special circumstances, monies like CARES and so forth. Now, other than that, we have fees and services. We had last year $15.4 million in grants. Interest, $4.5 million, and I'll get more into that later. We spent projected to spend $24.9 million from fund balance. And that's, in my mind, actually a good thing because we have fund balances available to be spent in water, wastewater, streets, irrigation, and the projects are necessary to maintain the city going forward. And then we had court revenues, $0.4 million. This comes from Canyon County, fees, delinquencies, fines, and assessments and so forth that comes back to us. That's grown substantially. It was about $300,000. Not a lot of money, but it's growing. And then franchise fees, $2.5 million. Franchise fees are the taxes you get on your electrical bill, your gas bill, your internet bill that come to the city, and we use those entirely for capital needs. They don't go to a city coffer for operational, they go right directly to the capital fund, and we use those for capital plans. And then last year, we had $30.4 million in loans entirely due to the DEQ wastewater treatment plant progress. So that's kind of the basis of what we've got. Now, let's go ahead and look at some actual numbers here on page 6 here. So what I've got is a 4-year trended run rate from 2021 to 2024 of our primary general government revenues. And what I wanted to draw your attention to is we start at the top line and look at property taxes. In 2021, and these are budgetary numbers, the actuals will go up a little bit for each of these as they come through, as we get delinquency, property taxes, or penalties and interest. But in '23, the increase was about $500,000. Not a substantial amount, but a little more than we budgeted for. Now, so we've got $3.7 million, and we're up $4.3 million in 2024. And the change over the prior year is about 5.2 to 5, maybe between 5 to 6. Now, you'll notice that, yeah.
Which one are you looking at? Because I'm not seeing your numbers,
Okay,
what
right
you're
here.
saying with that. So,
So these
okay,
numbers right here.
that's what you're talking about. Okay,
So-
so the 4.47.
Right.
Okay.
So that's what I'm going to explain right now.
Okay.
So I just told you a moment ago that we received about $2.3 million in new income, but here I'm showing it's 1.88855. Well, the rationale, the reason there is I've got it broken out is because of the GO bond maturing. We had $600,000 of fund balance that we used to pay a portion of the final general obligation bond, so we couldn't levy for that. So that brought our new change over prior year from $2.3 million, 2.35, down to 1.855. And I've got it broken out in detail in the secondary sheet. But that's just the fact that it was that accounting maneuver. We used fund balance to help pay for a portion of the last bond payment of $2.6 million. So we stay around that 5.6, between the 5 to 6% range, 3%, 2.5% of the statutory limit plus new construction monies. And in 2023, we had $2.2 million. In 2025, I'm anticipating it becomes $1.8 million, maybe 1.9. So we're down in new monies about $500,000. $300,000 to $500,000 decrease in new monies from property taxes. So looking at the second set of data down here on the shared revenues right here, these are the state shared revenues of general sales tax and liquor taxes. Back in '21, this is about when they redid the legislation to change the allocation to make it more population-based. we were getting $7.8 million, and then it spiked up to 10.8, and then to 12. And you can see in the last 2 years, we're pretty level right here. It's not going up much. And the current trend on the state reports, there's only out through January of this current year, state distributions of sales taxes are down 0.1%. So it's not going to, likely not going to go up next year. And what I'm bringing out to you here is we're seeing a flattening of revenues coming into 25. We've had 4 or 5 years of great growth. We've been able to use that effectively. We've had to cover wage costs that have gone up dramatically during the inflationary periods. That's been a significant impact. We've had capital programs. We've had needs for police. It's a significant impact on the finances. But as you'll see as we go through, we're seeing this wage curve flatten to almost flatten and going negative. So that's going to be a challenge going into the 25 year. Highway district revenues, you see how they've gone from $6.1 million to 11.2 over from 2021 right here to 2024. Well, that 11.2 is probably going to drop back down more towards the $8.2 million as that one particular piece of legislation matures and we don't get that additional money into the highway district revenues. And of course, those go all towards streets. It's all street funds and projects. Franchise fees. Now, franchise fees have had a pretty good increase. $1.6 million in 2021 to $2.5 million last year. Again, those are all 100% used for capital. We don't divert a penny of that for anything else but capital needs.
Doug, could I make a comment on that?
Sure.
Historically, back in the day, the franchise fees actually were dedicated to downtown Nampa, back in the day. And when it was less than that 1.6, it was prior to 21, it was probably in the, I don't know, David, when you were on 10 years ago, if it was at that time, but at some time ago, they were dedicated there, and then they got moved over into the city. And so I just wanted to,
Yeah,
as a,
it's a very good point. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you,
thank
Mayor. Let's go on down. Grant revenues, they're fluid by the year, but we've seen, we're probably one of the few cities that really chases grant revenue. Boise, Meridian doesn't even have a grants department. They don't have a streets department. They don't chase revenue. We chase the grant revenues to help flesh out the many needs of the city, and we're very effective at it. We've got Mark Stowler that does a great job. I've got an additional staff member who we hired last year to pursue additional grants under the theory that we leverage what's called IDC, indirect credit, where the grant receipt actually pays for the staff. So that's what we're doing right here in this one. So we're not using city money. We've actually already recouped enough in indirect credits to more than pay for that person's salary for the next 2 years. So that was a good win. The only area that we're seeing increase, and this is the limited benefit to us, is the interest income. You recall in the early part of COVID, interest rates were 0.2, 0.3%, almost zero. And then as inflation has hit, the rates have spiked rapidly upwards. We have $4.5 million. Now this includes impact fee interest, which must be designated to the impact fee account, so you can't use it anywhere else. It includes about $800,000 of ARPA interest income. And I should point out that this is the only federal fund allowed to be put into an interest-bearing account. Typically, the federal government does not allow you to put their money into an interest-bearing account. By law, you're barred from doing that, except on this particular, it was specifically allowed. So we have interest money there. And then we have interest money coming in from the fund balance in water and wastewater and general gov and irrigation and so forth. The general gov portion of this is about $1.2 million. The rest of it generally gets allocated out to the departments that have money in the bank. So it does help. Now, last year we used that $1 million for additional capital. If you recall, we set aside $926,000 in the capital fund to be used to be budgeted, but only used based on the needs of the council or the design of the council. And that money's still there. That's essentially this $1 million is in the capital budget waiting for assignment. And when we come to the amendment in about 4 or 5 weeks, we'll propose using part of that monies for a specific project. But that's how we're using that interest income. But that's the only thing that's really going up. And the likelihood of the way we've structured this with our investment advisor, if you watched the news yesterday, the Fed declined to decrease the rates, citing the troubling inflation is still hanging on, so they're not decreasing rates right now, which means when they get to the May and June meetings, they're likely to, but not guaranteed to do so. Depends on how political they choose to get in this election year. But if they do choose to start decreasing rates, and if inflation softens, then we're mostly protected for about a year and a half, because we have our investments in Morton Asset are based on a conservative but effective structure that allows us to invest in up to any investment vehicle up to a 5-year time limit with a maximum aggregate of 3 years. So let's say we buy a whole bunch of CDs. We could buy one for 5 years if we had a great rate and we thought it was going to stick. But the aggregate of all of those investments cannot exceed 3 years, so that we have the chance to let these mature. We're probably right now at an aggregate investment time of just a little less than 2 years. So if rates start dropping, we'll still get we'll still get good quality interest rates through 2025. I can't say longer than that because I don't know the trends, but it will help us stabilize it. We have money in the money markets. Those will drop as the rates do automatically, but right now they're good. Any questions here on the basics of the revenue? Okay.
Mayor Kling.
Keep in mind that,
Just a quick question. You say money markets, not mutual funds.
they essentially the same thing as a mutual fund, but they call it a money market at Morton Asset, and then we have our cash investments at Wells Fargo. All of our significant cash accounts are invested at market rates. They're all the same rate, which right now about 5.4 to 5.2%. We have slightly better investment rates at the state, 5.4, and Wells Fargo and Morton are at 5.2 to 5.3.
Okay. So your potential for liquidity and use is there.
Oh, yeah, we've got it. We keep, at Morton Asset, I keep $10 million in liquidity. At any one time, I can get $10 million out of them. At the state fund LGIP, I maintain about $15 million for liquidity issues. And then we have whatever we have in our depository account, which could be anywhere from $2 to $5 million. So we have liquidity. So the land purchase was out of the cash.
So you're holding about 25 to 30 million as far as in reserves?
Right. It's very effective now. If rates fall down to the 2% range, 3% range, we need to reevaluate how we do that and get the most out of our money. But right now, it's very effective. And that we also have this year, we have a short-term funding gap from DEQ on the wastewater treatment plant, where they have advanced us $135 million. I think it's $135 million. And there's $30 million remaining to be spent that they will not reimburse us until August, September, October. So there's a short-term liquidity gap. So that's why I'm keeping the cash reserves in liquidity high, so I can fund that particular piece of the city's infrastructure.
So is there a set percentage of our general fund, or basically that we need to hold? Just
There is a maximum we can put into that, a per city policy, and I believe it is 20% of our total funds, I believe.
Okay.
We won't go any higher than that.
Thank you.
So this is the breakout this is from the file I sent you earlier in the week from the 2024 executive summary. And this shows, this table on my left here is the total source of the funds for 2024 by percentage. We can see here property taxes account for 15% of the total city's funds. Now by far the biggest is fees and services, and that's water, wastewater, irrigation, sanitation, and other fees and services. That's by far the biggest source of funds. Fund balance is 9%, grants and loans 15%, developmental fees for the building department, miscellaneous, and then intergovernmental when we're moving. This is primarily the money coming in from the state, the shared revenues, and then transfers and allocations. We do allocate out our service charges, so for all of the costs that the city bears to operate the city, meaning IT, HR, finance, mayor's office, legal, and so forth, we do allocate a portion of those costs out to the various departments to help them pay for their portion, and that helps provide a small amount of funding within the city. On the governmental side, for general gov, you can see that property taxes pays for 56%, and that is entirely going towards the police department. The police department, their budget in '24 was a little over $3.3 million. The total general gov allocation to that function was $31 million. So we're $2 million pulling from state government funds, other funds that use more than their allocation of property taxes. And I want to get into the property tax allocations coming up next year, because that's really critical, because the pressure on the city is going to grow in terms of funding public safety and meeting the needs of the parks and the library and the airport and the city. It's going to grow and become a challenge as we go forward. And this is going to form, I hope, hopefully inform your choice on our request for a 3% levy in 2025. And I'll get to that, why we want to ask for that. But primarily, it's going to come down to the fact that our costs, even though mitigating, and you recall, if you were, last year, the councilors here will remember I talked about the labor, and last year we had a 4% COLA and a 2% merit, and I got up here and I said, I think that's hopefully the last of the large wage adjustments, and we wanted to get back down to a more normal 3% range, and that's where we're headed this year. So we're bringing that back down, but we're still seeing wage pressures and other inflationary costs, particularly in the public works sector. Although the governmental money doesn't fund public works, we try and manage the city on the same basis for all departments. So if we have a wage increase in the general gov at 3%, it's generally 3% in the public works sector. So we try and manage this as a unique, or as a set of one organization. So, but we operate on the matching principle. That's a specific accounting term where we match revenues to costs, and we try and match the cost to the revenues in the same period, and we try and match the revenues based on when they're received. And since we're modified accrual, I can only count for monies that we received during the course of any one year. Now I want to pay attention to this graph, because this graph goes two different directions. Across the top are the departments, and this is just property taxes, and down the column or the rows are the years. And what I'd like you to look at here is, as we talk about general gov, $32.9 million for the budget. That's an increase of $2.045 million. Let me hover on this line just for a minute, this $2.045 million across the line. We can see that in '24, general gov got the lion's share of the increase, where that went primarily, almost not entirely, but primarily to police. Streets, we stopped increasing the streets funding from property tax back in 2022 because they were getting more money from JFAC and the various sales tax initiatives driving additional money to the streets. Now, as I pointed out, that might be reversing in 2025. The funds will be going down, so we'll again face tremendous pressure as one of the city's top priorities to fund streets, but we're not giving them any additional resources out of our property taxes. We haven't been able to. The bucket's just been too tight. The airport gets a little bit. Primarily the airport, the parks, and the cemetery, and the library, those increases were one purpose only, just to keep them level. As they have cost increases, as they have wage increases, and they're dealing with the realities of inflation, that's all I could squeeze out, and that barely kept them flat with their funding needs compared to costs. Not a lot of money going in there. And then you see the final one that I mentioned, the $642,000 decrease. That's where we used fund balance to make the final GO bond payment. Well, when we make the final GO bond payment in August, that's the use of that fund, so that leads to the 1.8. Prior year, 2.2, and then 2.213 million dollars in 23, and 2.7 million dollars in 22. And so we had some great years, and we've used that money wisely. We have not wasted it. What we've done is we budget for a contingency, and we allow ourselves the capacity to deal with unexpected issues by not spending every dollar we receive. We try and invest our dollars, use them wisely with council needs, and have them available for times like now when our revenue is starting to decrease. We can deal with issues, but it will be a bit of a tough challenge in 25 to make everything balance. But what I'd like to look at now is look at the general gov, the percent. 75.8% of the funding went to general gov. And last year it was 74, 73. 2021 was a little bit of an aberration because we're coming out of the fire district break off, and it distorts some of the monies. But you can see that very slowly the pressure on the gen gov as a percent of total is increasing. And that's primarily due to the need to fund public safety. So it's not a huge increase, but it's going up. And that's putting pressure on all the other departments to how do they meet their needs when the funding capacity is relatively predictable, but a larger percentage slowly gets diverted towards general government and the public safety sector. I'm not making a judgment value, I'm just saying that's the mathematics of where this is going. And we know that in police, if we want to maintain our current level of service, according to current studies, that's about 5.5 new police officers, not support staff, just 5.5 new police officers. Each police officer, a new one, costs about $135,000 to $145,000 to hire them, train them, equip them, kit them out, get them a car for every 2 staff, and bring them on board, $145,000. So if we take 5, you can do the math, you're well over $650,000, $700,000 just to bring 5 new officers on board. That's to maintain the staffing level. Right now, the average, and I'll get to this in just a minute, the average we're able to bring on per year is about 3. So we're half of what we need to maintain the current levels. Now, the mayor's directing us and the police to look at various other evaluation methods of what's the correct staffing level. And we don't quite have that yet, but we are looking at other analyses to determine exactly what the staffing should be. But historically, we're struggling to keep up with the priority. Now, if you take let's say $700,000 for 5 new staff, and I've got $1.8 million, and then I've got wage increases for the city, and we've got healthcare costs. Healthcare is a blessing, but it's a blessing that's been very heavily used coming out of COVID. And every week I pay claims. And if those claims exceed $100,000 per week, I am diluting our fund balance. I've got about a $2.8 million healthcare fund balance. I'm required by the DOI to maintain about half of that as a floor. I cannot invade that floor per DOI requirements. And if over the course of last year, in fact, last 6 months, we've spent $500,000 of that fund balance. Now, we're hoping that it was a one-time aberration and the claims will soften, but 2 weeks ago, my claims were $277,000 per 1 week. Last week, they were $88,000, and it's going like this back and forth. It's making it very difficult to predict, but we're going to have some degree of impact on healthcare costs this year that we cannot avoid. We know we'll have a degree of wages we cannot avoid. We know we have staffing requirements. When you add all these numbers up, it's going to be difficult to make it all fit together in the same bucket the way we've done in the prior years because we've had increasing money supplies. Now we do not. Other cities, if you've heard, I am not advocating, I am informing. Other cities, Meridian and Boise, have chosen to take the 3% plus 1% of foregone.
That's our understanding at
That's
this
our
time.
understanding at this time. That's their intent. What they're doing is reflecting the same story I'm telling you. They're seeing the same decrease of revenues that we are, and their reaction is to pull money, their likely reaction is to pull additional funds from foregone to help supplement new construction monies that aren't coming in as they have historically. We, because of how we've budgeted conservatively, we can maintain, we'll struggle with the police, and the mayor has some suggestions about that, but we'll struggle with getting the police to 5.5. In fact, I flat out can't do it under the best of circumstances to hire 5.5 employees, and that's just the police officers, not the staff. And I'll get to that in a minute. So you get an idea here that we have an allocation trend that goes very heavily towards general gov streets, gets some airports, the next one's parks, $2.7 million, library, $2.7 million, and the GEO bond. Now, the GEO bond will go away this year. Depending on what happens with the election, it may come back, and if so, that will become a new assessment for the 2025 year, depending upon the timing. It's important to note that the GEO bond, the amount there, is not part of our base. The 3% does not attach to that GEO bond. It's a separate calculation. So they take our total assessment, back off the GEO bond, make a few other adjustments, and then they are able to determine what our 3% ceiling might be. But if we look at something like parks, they're kind of going up and down a little bit. In 2021, they had 5.5%. Now, in fairness, I give them property tax monies, and I also take and give almost an equal amount of money from shared revenues on the transfers to help them meet their needs. But property tax for parks has been, they haven't seen a lot of love here. 5.5% last in 21, and in 22 was 6%, but the reason it went up that much is because we allocated more cost to them to pay for their fleet services. So I give them more money on one hand and I take it away on the other. So it kind of stayed there, and almost all their increases are strictly to help drive or cover the cost of increased wages and health care benefits. And that's the same with all the departments.
Mayor, can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Certainly.
So Doug, is there information or that the directors could assist with? I guess I'm a little surprised that library has jumped so much the last 4 years. So we have a single-use piece in the versus Parks and Recs, same amount of money basically.
Mm-hmm. Now, the increase in 23 was due in large part to the bookmobile. We brought that one on and added some additional cost. The bookmobile itself was funded by grants, but the operational costs were not. So that was an increase there as an increase in service, so in 23. But if you look at their wage rate, I believe, and I'm just drawing from memory here, I believe the wage increases we've given them were more proportionally aligned to them. They had the lowest base pay of almost any department in the city. They're part-time people earning $11, $12 an hour, and you could go to Winco and get a job for $15 just by walking in the door. So when we did the pay raise 2 years ago, it was called 2+2, and it was designed at $2 plus 2%. And when you have that type of a dollar and a percent metric, you're shifting the increase very heavily towards the lower end of the pay scale. So you're taking the people at the top and giving them a lower percentage, maybe 3 or 4%, 5%, and the people at the bottom might get as much as a 15%. So what you're seeing there on 23 is also the fact that we had to, in order to keep them staffed, we gave them the raise that more proportionately was allocated to lower incomes, and that was most of the staff in the library, the part-time staff. Does that answer part of your question?
Well, somewhat, but I can meet with the directors and dig in deeper rather than taking time here.
Oh, certainly.
I'm just looking at,
We would
number of
love, this
acres.
is all surface level. There's a ton, it's like an iceberg.
Yeah, I'm just looking
There's a
at-
ton beneath the surface.
library is one location and what the users are versus Parks and Rec, multiple locations and a vast, many more people utilizing
Yeah.
Parks and Rec than library. And we're funding the two the same. On the surface, seems out of balance to me.
See, that's part of the reason I wanted to bring this up, really, because what's happened since I've got on, and probably before I got here, is we've tended to operate based off of history. We say, well, we did it last year, so let's keep the same funding mechanism rolling in place because that's what's needed to maintain the current environment. What I'm trying to do here is bring information so that not so that we can cut somebody, but so that we can begin to shape the future of how we allocate our resources for the next 5, 10 years. What should we look like? Let's look forward to when the urban renewal sunset's, assuming that the state legislature does not completely tear that away from us. When that matures, how would we use those resources? How should we? So the intent here is to start that thought process going forward. If we were to reallocate, if I were to take this year and reallocate resources to pull some from the library and add it to parks, you have a kind of a seismic shift in the impact of the service to the city. You would lose service at the library, you might gain some at the parks, but it's a seismic shift that takes a little bit of study and preparation to look into. So my intent is to give this information out there and get you all thinking about that. Where do we go in the future? How do we allocate these resources? And you just hit on my almost entirety of my intent today is to say, let's begin looking at where we need to go.
And David, one thing, I was visiting with Claire just this week, and I think she could share with you the numbers of employees prior to building the library to the number today. My understanding was it's not significantly different. But she'll be able to give you all those numbers. So I think with every department, we'll be able to show
Yes.
the labor increases that have taken place over time, because that's the kind of numbers, you need the data, right, to look at.
Correct.
And I
we've
think
got
we've
that.
got that we will have that for everyone, for each of the departments, and so it'll make it really easy for you, and we'll be happy to
At
get
the
it.
same time, I'll visit with her and find out user side. I mean,
Yeah.
because we have a lot of space and building dedicated, what's the use? And how much use we derive out of the park side versus the library side, allocating the same funds.
Well, and you have the same question, Counselor, when it regards to the streets. If streets and public safety are the number one issues, and then the funding from the state starts to soften, how do we as a city respond to that? I don't know the answer. So this is meant to be thought stimulating and preparatory, not just for 25, but how we set the stage for future years.
And you know,
I'm also trying to get up to speed and understand how much the library is still, in our day of change of technology, and how much e-reading takes place. I just got to go to spend time to get educated how the library is really still benefiting for
I
the same
think we'll be able
dollars.
to show you, like the children's programming that's happening there, the use of the multipurpose room that's used a lot for a lot of different groups that are using that multipurpose room. And it's wonderful that you have a place to go that doesn't cost a lot, and virtually nothing to use. So there's quite a few programs out of there. So that would be, should be more than happy to visit with you and to take you through that. But I think those are good questions. I think they're really good questions that we all need to look at across the board. And I might just share, I think council's going to be receiving invitations. I visited with our staff, and we'll be inviting you prior to budget workshop to some very specific departmental reviews of budgets. So then prior to even receiving the budget, you're going to see where they're going. You're going to be able to ask questions. Those will be hopefully scheduled the end of April, first part of May, before we wrap up our budget and before you ever get the budget book. That way, if there are questions, concerns, staff will be informed and you'll be informed both ways in having those discussions before we wrap our budget up to present to you. So those will be good, and just know those will be forthcoming, and that'll be also an opportunity to ask questions.
That'd be helpful,
Yeah,
Mr. Huck.
yes.
Here. David, I forgot to mention to you in our conversation the other day that, about the library and the use of that building. 10 years ago, when it came up in conversation when it was being constructed, the potential use of a portion of the building for something other than a library was not allowed by the urban renewal agency, or urban renewal plan at that point. And until it becomes a city entity, city-owned property and use totally, it can't be switched. It has to remain a library, as far as I understand. Now, legal counsel can give us a little bit more definition. That would be Bill Nichols. But I've always advocated for use of the lower portion of the building for retail so that there would be some return back on the investment in the building. But we had limitation. That was what the private side was meant to be, those two buildings along 2nd Street, 3rd Street, whatever, that 2nd Street. Anyway, but I had a question, Mayor, for Doug, a couple of things. I haven't read Todd's response back to me yet, but on the use of foregone, will be an advocate for the use of foregone because it's just additional taxation. And when we're talking about baseline budgeting, it stays there and continues to be an entity that the current property owners will have to carry. But my question about emergency, our police department and the investment that we've made in the integrated command center, Mayor, will a part of the conversation going forward with the number of officers being needed take that into consideration? Because my understanding that the integrated command center helped them to be able to provide more filtration of information across for those that are actually on the streets.
Yeah.
And so the number of actual people on the street at any one point in time, it'd be nice if it was more, but it's not really necessary. So because of that integrated command center that others don't have. Now, maybe they will say more to that when we get into the process.
We can invite them up and talk, but this is what I do know. That will help them focus how they use the resources. We know that we're already not providing enough resources to maintain the level of service, so this helps them utilize more effectively what they got. But I don't know, and this is also the other reason why the mayor's looking at other analytics to determine what should the level of resource be for the police across the city. There's another metric, I don't remember the name of it, Mayor, the one that, Pam, right, the one that we're looking at, which is the new, little more, maybe possibly more sophisticated way of looking at what resources are needed in an area. But I know that we're already not supplying enough to maintain the level of service. So to the extent that can help, that's critical. But I don't think it's a solution to all the problems going forward.
Just, I'd like to see from, in their presentation when it comes, that it doesn't need to be today, that we are looking at our wisest and best use of the dollars available and still providing them the resources that they need, which I thought having the integrated command center was doing.
Yeah.
So going forward, we just want to have eyes wide open on all the processing that it takes and what the costs are associated with it, so that we're looking at things wisely, especially when you get to the topic about going after foregone, because that, again, that's from my standpoint something that has never been a starter for me. But
Councilor, I will always support the dialogue that gets in the numbers. Those of you who have worked with me know that my intent is not to come up and sell a process. It's to give facts and give information so that you as councilors and the mayor can make the right decisions. I've long believed this and operated this way at Albertsons and St. Luke's. The better information you have, the more facts you have, the better decision you can make. And that's my job, is to give that information, not to necessarily, I'll give you my opinion, but not necessarily to drive a process. That's your decision. So I will always support the discussion of the full discussion of the facts and the impacts, always.
If I could make a...
just to follow up to that
So
was,
follow up then Dale, and then I'll have a comment.
there was a couple of years that the council chose to freeze the foregone. That was saved, that amount. And I believe, I asked Todd, he was going to look into it, that at the state level, there was, if you don't choose to use it, it ends up being frozen as well.
Frozen and disclaimed.
Or disclaimed. So it's still accessible by future councils?
Future, like this, let's say this year, we were to budget at 2.5, that 0.5 differential would automatically be disclaimed. It goes away. The only way we could move it into foregone was by resolution from the
By
council to do
action
so.
then, okay, so that's what it is. If you choose to move it forward, you can.
Right.
Otherwise, it's gone.
Yes.
That is a recent change. It
That was-
used to
that was
be it
280
automatically went
yeah.
to foregone. With the legislative change, it changed to where you had to actually by resolution choose to retain it.
Okay.
And so the last years where we weren't at 3%, we did allow it to just go away.
Yeah, we did.
And I know that there was a set value that it was, was a rollover from years past that was still accessible, was like $4 million.
$4.4 million.
But, that's where we decided not to keep increasing it, that was an adequate amount to have as a set aside. But again, it's taxes that haven't been collected. It's not like it's money that's sitting in an account someplace, so.
That's a really important distinction. It is.
Yes.
It's money is available to be taxed, but has not been assessed to anybody as of yet. So it is a tax increase if you use it, yes. That's clear.
Dale?
Madam Mayor, Doug, I just want to add a comment about the PD. So you probably all know I'm a big advocate for the PD. And the RTC is a force multiplier for Nampa.
Yeah.
If we didn't have it, we really would be in trouble.
Yeah.
But we're already in trouble as it is with the number of officers. I would encourage each council member to go spend some time at the PD with a ride-along. And don't go in the day shift, go in the night shift.
Yep.
When you've got 6 officers on at night and that's all you've got coming, it's a bad deal. I think we need to hire 7 officers as a minimum to get us, we're not anywhere close to where we need to be. But there's all kinds of, it's real nerve-wracking. I've been in some scary situations, but Nampa, for what we are as a city, it's night and day difference when you go out in Nampa,
Yep.
which is like during the daytime, which is like Mayberry, maybe, if you will, and then you go out at night, it's 180 degrees difference. So I would encourage each council member to take that time. I realize that sleep is valuable, but I've been out there a few times at 3 o'clock in the morning, and it's a whole different world, and we need the support. And if we want to keep the gangs and the violence and the drugs out of our city, we have to support our public safety.
I do know that our sister city Meridian is considering, not in 25 but in 26, going to the public to increasing their levy with the intent of hiring more police. So Chief Huff and Skoglund can talk about this more, but I think we have a different dynamic in police needs in Nampa than Meridian does. And if Meridian is going out, this is what I heard from them, that it's not settled, they're proposing, if they're going out to increase the levy, to increase their staffing, and we're not, what's the result? I'm just
So
saying. This is
just-
another,
I'd like a quick comment. So just 2 things. One, the PAM model of researching, the reason that we're looking at that is just that it's a more current assessment of what the staffing levels should be.
Yeah.
More than likely, it's going to show us that we're too low. It's
Yeah.
not going to show us that we're okay.
No.
When we get that done, it's going to go the other direction.
The question
But
is
it
how
is
you-
it's become the more common. Instead of 1.5 officers per 1,000, it quantifies it in the way it does the research, because not all communities are the same, right? So it looks at our community and it identifies what our staffing levels should be. But just a quick reminder that when House Bill 389 came in, and you took that 10% off new construction, and it drove our levy down, people didn't see the change in property taxes because their assessed values went way high.
Yep.
But that had nothing to do with our budget. But the revenue now that's coming from new construction, that's that $2.4 million
year.
that would be in our budget today that isn't. And that's where you have other cities looking at, and they've always taken the 3%, we didn't.
Yeah.
And you know what I'm thinking, like even the wastewater bond, it could move us out of the best run city with Wallet Hub because it has to do with debt,
Yep.
right? But we have to compete against those other 2 municipalities. And our wages aren't matching their wages, and so when we have our officers leaving, they're hiring, they're paying more, it puts us in a position that serious policing needs are higher than the other well, maybe not Boise, but Meridian.
Yeah.
But the wages are higher and it's hard to retain. So where our citizens said growth is supposed to fund growth, it's not. Because now you've got the construction coming in, it's not covering the cost of police alone because of the way our levy has dropped so low, and that's what's happened in the other municipalities. What they're seeing is that it's pushed the levy so low that it isn't funding their city at the same level. So that's why they're considering going with the 3+1 and taking it because it's not coming in through new construction.
Mayor, and I totally agree. I concur with what Councilman Reynolds said. We all, I think, to a person on this council and you as mayor, support our local law enforcement. All my comment was to be is, if there's going to be a careful analysis, look at the integration of the technology that's available. And I think that's what I heard. What we have is state-of-the-art compared to anybody else in our part of the country, for sure. So having that analysis include the ability to integrate the technology that's available today is it's going to leapfrog us to a better place. So just, again, we're working with tax dollars, and we represent those that those tax dollars are being taken from. And the utilization of those tax dollars needs to be our number one focus, so it always has been mine. So, going forward, you just need to be able to balance the two, but give them the resources that they need, which I thought we were doing.
And can I say one more real quickly answer to that? One thing about the Real-Time Crime Center is it helps us find the criminals once the action took place, but it doesn't help us prevent. And so what's difficult is if you don't have people on the street, if you don't have the bodies out there, it's very difficult to be proactive at all. And so it allows us to be reactive, and we're able to catch people that otherwise we wouldn't have caught, but it keeps us and it's been very, very, very helpful. But if we're always behind, we'll be in a reactive sense instead of a proactive sense. And I think that's probably the biggest difference of having enough people. And so on the criminals and that sort of thing, it really does. It's been a huge, huge help, and it will continue to be.
I know I'm running out of time.
I'm sorry.
How long do I have, Shar?
You have till 15 after.
Okay. So just one more item on this topic, just to put it in perspective for this year. So if you recall, for those of you here last year when we created the most recent association negotiation, we gave them a big upfront lift, about 10% in this year, 24, and then they would match whatever the city got in 25. All right, so we spent ahead to get that 10%, meaning for 24, I used the excess money from interest income to fund it for 1 year prior to getting the property taxes. Now the property taxes will be coming in the 25 budget. That means that dollar value that I had to borrow was $630,000. So you take my $1.8 million, you take off $630,000 for that, so we're down to $1.2 million. Let's say I give them 3%, that's $700,000, 1.3 million, I'm down to $500,000. That's for every other cost increase in the city. I'm not public works, everything. It won't be enough. So if we take anything less than 3%, we will not be able to fund, and that doesn't even account for hiring new police staff. Now, if we want to get to 2, 3, 4, 5, I've got to do some quick maneuvering, and I've got to strip some funds out of one place to fund police in another. All right? I don't have new monies to take it, to do it, but they need new staff, and otherwise the service level falls off even more dramatically. So to the extent that we can take the 3%, it will forestall the amount of money I have to strip from our reserves to meet the needs of public safety. If we don't take the 3%, the spend rate that I'll be going through will take our contingency and about move it to zero by the time we get to 26, nothing left of contingency. Now, if you recall, we had a contingency in the budget last year. We put in for healthcare costs, for police needs and so forth. And I've been spending that down every year. and we had $2.5 million a year ago. Well, I used $892,000 for the police, so I'm down to 1.5. It's going downhill rapidly. If I use more of that, which I may have to for police staffing, it goes down very rapidly. To the extent we have 3%, it helps me stretch that value and helps preserve this financial stability of the city. Now, that's the council decision. That's basically the reason why we're asking for the 3%. We're having decreasing revenues and increasing costs, and I am not proposing going out on a limb, but I'm proposing kind of a middle ground step where we take the 3%, we don't give the police maybe exactly what they want, but we give them enough to hold off to hopefully the economy recovers a little bit. But what if the economy doesn't recover? And then we have 2 years of not being able to staff police. Then we're really starting to head down a path. So,
Madam Mayor?
Yeah.
I just have one quick comment to follow up, Doug. So I agree with what Councilman Haverfield said about trying to maximize and leverage technology in our PD. I think that's fantastic. But boots on the ground can't be replaced for what we need, boots on the ground. I was completely shocked at the stats that were shared with us in a workshop. I think it was a workshop we had with what the PD is not able to respond to. I didn't ever think in our city, and being a native Idahoan, that we'd ever see where you could go steal $49 worth of stuff and the PD's not going to show up.
yeah.
It's just, to me, it baffles me. I'm like,
California.
in my day, if you stole a grape from Albertsons, you were going down. And so, anyway, they're just saying, boots on the ground are important because that does what the technology
Again,
can't do. so.
I'll share the facts, I'll share my opinion. You as counselors get to make the choice, but hopefully we can find some happy medium to weather the challenges. I hope we never go back to a 2008 type process. That's my goal in budgeting, to always have enough in the bank that if something bad happens, we can deal with it without causing significant upheaval in the city. And that's been my approach for budgeting. These are I wanted to show this very briefly. This is cost building trends of the budget, and I'll show actuals in a minute. So from 2025, General Gov increased 25% over the prior year, 10% in 23 over the prior year, and 7.3. The point here is that increase in the budgetary growth the increase is decreasing. So because the new funds are going down, so we're getting less new monies to work with every year. And that's just the trend we're dealing with. It's a reality. It's not the sky is falling. It just means the ceiling's closer to our head than it was in prior years. And then we look at the budgets. Last year in 24, we were pretty stingy in the budget. We went through the budget and we tried to comb out anything that didn't belong. Don't get me wrong, there's still more work to do. We have more numbers to look at and pull out, but the police went from 13.2% in 22 to 10.4% in 23 to 4.1% in 24. And that's all primarily a function of FTE hiring and union associations.
So Doug, you just said this, but just to be clear, this is the total budget or just labor budget?
This is the total budget.
This is total budget, so there's a whole lot more that goes
Whole lot
into
more
that
going on.
budget. It's not just labor.
This is the
Yeah.
the warthog, probably sorry, not the warthog. It's what I can remember it as, the Bearcat. The other costs, their union health care costs, the robots they need, the training they absolutely have to have in order to protect the city.
Well, I'm
those
not
type of
talking
things.
police, I'm talking every budget,
Everybody.
because it looks
All
like
right.
a significant increase, but you would have to break that down in a
Yep.
separate one that's
Yes.
just showing labor
Yes.
versus full budget,
And I've
because
got
it has
a
everything.
little bit of that down below here.
And does this include a 3% increase?
This is historical. So in 24, it was the 3% increase, and in 23, it was like 2.75. In 22, I don't think we were allowed to take anything in 22 because of the GPSGI, the governor's safety initiative. I think it was zero in that year because they paid us $9 million for police, and we just passed that through. But anyway, we can see that the trend is going downward. But the interesting part, this is where I have to pull my boots up and get some work done. Yes.
Go ahead, Shar.
Madam Mayor, council members, Councilmember Griffin is actually online. I don't believe he can speak, but he did put in the chat, are we able to bond for police, or is our only budget option, aside from taking the 3%, taking foregone?
No, you can bond. You definitely can. You can go to the public. It's a public election, just like the GO bond, where you put forward your case of why you want the increase and let the public decide if they want to, but you can. And that's what Meridian's considering doing.
Yeah, but,
I think Sebastian was
Mayor-
asking a question.
oh, okay, excuse me.
Sebastian?
No, I apologize. I'm at the dentist, and so I just had them take that out of my mouth to be able to speak, so I apologize. I'm listening online. That would be before I put the cart in front of the horse with what I'm saying. I didn't realize that was an option. I had been told that that was not an option. I'd be more open to the discussion of possibly looking at a bond option prior to taking foregone. But once again, that opinion isn't set in stone, and I'm not that place to say definitively.
Let's be clear, it's not a bond. If there are multiple reasons you can go to the public for a increase in tax base. The current transportation bond is a one-time investment or one-time request for capital funds. That's one option. This would not be a bond if you went to the public to ask for an increase. It would be an ongoing levy increase. Did you have a comment on this, Councilor Bills? You wanted to say something earlier.
I was going to clarify
Okay,
the
please.
levy versus debt.
Yes,
And what you
yes.
can get debt for.
Right.
So,
That's
okay.
it, exactly. That's
Thanks
exactly
for-
what I was talking about, levy versus debt, yeah.
Thank you.
All right. So I'm running out of time here, but let's look at this one right here. Let's look at the percentage line, the 75% and the 86%. This says how much of the budget I spent according to what I budgeted. So in '23, I spent 75% of my general non-police budget. Why would I only spend 75%? For the general government, that's by design. We have that amount of contingency we're trying not to spend to hang on to it for future budgets. We hang on to that by design. That's intended. We bring it up in the council, we show it to you, we tell you what it's for, and we tell you that we have this in the budget, and it's only to be spent if you as council approve it. So that's by design. But we looked at police, they're much closer to the top. In 22, they were 99% of their budget, 91, 83, and 30, 93. And the reason they're below here is because they haven't been fully staffed. Their FTEs on the budget were greater than their FTEs actual. Now I think, Chief Huff, you're up to the point where you're about fully staffed now, I think. So we're going to see that number come closer. But when we look at streets and water and irrigation and wastewater, we see an average of, 72%, 89%, 79%, 89.9%. So most of this is because they're over budgeting for repair and maintenance and projects. And we made a huge improvement last year in whittling this down. We need to do it again because we should only be budgeting for what we're going to spend. Most of this is not operational costs that are being over budgeted, but there are some of those elements in there that we're going to try and whittle those out during the course of this year. But my intent this year is the response to funding is not just get more funding. Some of the response needs to be spend more wisely, right? That's got to be the other side of the coin. So that's what I'm trying to do in the budget process is look at where we're spending the money and look for opportunities to pull out that budgetary authority that's not being used and use that to offset the increasing labor cost to the extent possible. That's one of my biggest goals. That's why I'll do the Gangnam Style dance. If I can get people to do that, it's worth a little bit of embarrassment to say, let's get this to a point where we're more efficient in how we budget and use our monies.
So Doug, I have a question. So we have 5 minutes left.
Okay,
What I'm going to suggest is that we skip the wage because those are numbers that we can all read.
Okay.
I'd like you to move to your wrap
Okay.
to talk about a little bit about just your wrapping couple slides and summaries, and then we do need a nod on 3% or not
Right.
because we know how to budget. We need to know how to budget.
So these are my budget objectives. We want to aggressively focus on budget accuracy. We started really focusing on that last year, and we had a $60 million decrease in our budget last year. A lot of that was wastewater treatment plant, but a lot of it was just us getting better on the budgetary process. That needs to continue this year. Improve budget accuracy. That reduces the amendment. That makes the whole life a lot easier. Refine the approval process of projects, both actual and budget. How we spend our capital funds needs more refinement and more attention to detail. That's another big process. And then we need to leverage the funds that we have to the maximum. That comes back to making sure when we put something in the budget, it's the right spend. I don't want to go to anybody and say, you can't spend money. What I want to go to them and spend, let's spend the money in the right way that gives the most benefit to the city. So those are my objectives. Now, how we do that? We may want to shift more to line item budget focus. In the past, I've looked at the total budget for a department, and I've told the departments, if you meet your total budget, I'm okay if one line goes up and one line goes down. But the problem is we have that volatility. We may overspend lines incorrectly. So I think we're going to shift more towards line item authority. So if a department says, hey, I've got a budget need, but I've already spent my money, then it needs to come back to finance, mayor, and council for determination if we exceed that budgetary authority. That's one of the things that I think we need to be doing. Non-labor operational budget reduction. So you take out the labor and the benefits piece, you look at the operational. In 2024, our city budget outside of all capital was $120 million, give or take. $60 million was for non-operational labor, $60 million was for labor costs. So if I take and can reduce the 60 million by 5%. I'm not going to get there all the way because not everybody can do it, but that's the goal. We want to consider moving maybe in 2026 to a zero-based budget process. Make people start from scratch and build up. That's a royal pain, but it might be the step we have to take to start and weed out all the chaff. It depends on how well we do this year. If I can get people to voluntarily start pulling things out, I don't have to go zero-based. And if it doesn't happen, then I may have to go zero-based. And then we're also launching the purchasing coordinator position to help us focus on cost efficiency as a starting point on operational costs, non-capital but operational costs. So those are the 4 things that we're going to be working on.
This last one is not a new position. It's reallocating a resource internally to absorb this
Yes.
responsibility, not a new position.
I'm giving up a staff member to help this function move forward. It's critical. So
But this will
I'm
be cost savings for the city.
yeah, exactly. So
Better monitor.
that's the essence, and you get an idea that when I come to you, it's not going to be, hey, let's spend more money because finance doesn't want to go to the work of really putting in the heavy lifting to help the department save it. It's a combination of both. We need both this year to make work. I'm committing on our side to work with the departments, cut the non-operational expenses. I would request of the council the approval to proceed forward with the budget bill at 3%.
Doug, thank you. Really appreciate this. I know that there's a lot of information in there, but as the council knows from last year to this year, we're really trying to come ahead of the budget cycle and provide really good information. I do want to ask for those council members that were not on at the beginning of this meeting, it's absolutely imperative that you go back and review this. In fact, it would be good for everyone to go back and watch this presentation because Doug was providing the foundation for why we are where we are, and it's really, really important.
Yeah.
But the question then is, do we proceed with a 3% anticipation from the council? I think, okay. Yes.
It's always been nice to aim a little bit lower and then have the discussion at the end of the budgeting process to see if we want to increase it, because we aren't able to get to where we really want to be, just like this last cycle where we went ahead and increased it to the full 3% to be able to add a couple more officers. That was a decision that was made, or it's more, at least to the police department, whether it was staff or officers. But I think it's nice to be able to aim a little bit lower to try to refine, and again, thank you so much, Doug, for what you do. You're such a breath of fresh air compared to where we were 10 years ago with 2 big 3-ring binder booklets that we were trying to go through and assess who needed things more than others. Having a team approach is so key, Mayor. Having your department heads working together in that regard, because it makes our job a lot easier. It's gone from 3 to 4 days down to 1 at some times. So that's a credit to our finance director and their department.
Thank you, Randy. Any other comments, thoughts? Dale?
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
I'm in support of the 3%, especially where it involves funding the PD.
I can tell you, without the 3%, the capacity to fund PD will be extremely external, meaning we've got to find a whole different way of doing it. and it would be unpleasant, might be a word for it.
I think we need to clarify, actually, with the 3%, that doesn't necessarily
No,
even fund
3%.
new officers. All we're trying to do is catch up with the contract
Right.
negotiations and what we gave them last year and the impact it has
That's
this year on
that's
the
exactly
budget.
right. The
So we're
3%.
playing catch-up.
The 3% just keeps their head above water and doesn't add any new staff. So without the 3%, more difficult.
Yeah. Any other thoughts? Because we're going to build the budget.
I would like, from my perspective, I understand both Councilor Haverfields and Councilor Reynolds. I have a struggle building it twice.
Sorry, Madam Mayor. Council Member Jangula put in the chat, I'm in support of budgeting with a baseline of 3%.
Okay, thank you. Okay. I don't know where else to go, Mayor. That's
I'm
my
not sure
opinion.
either, but go ahead.
I'm sorry. And Councilmember Griffin said, I am in as well.
Okay.
Okay.
Mayor Kling.
Yes.
I talked with Doug, a couple of weeks ago regarding the budget,
Yeah.
and we went over this, so I'm pretty much right on top of it. But I'd like to meet with you again and go over this presentation with you.
Certainly. That'll be part of the meetings we set up in April.
Oh,
We'll
okay.
try and get 3
Okay.
counselors at a time. And the goal is, with the counselors, is to address the pressure points. I don't want to go over the basic details. We want to hit the pressure points that are really going to become a discussion in the budgetary process. That is certainly one of the topics.
Okay. And in talking with Chief Huff and the community regarding our public safety, I'm in full support of 3%.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor.
One of our goals this year is to, while Doug is so willing to answer questions and do one-on-one meetings, he has a very difficult time getting his job done when he's in a lot of one-on-one meetings. Hence, this presentation to council today, and we can go back online and rewatch it. And then the meetings that we're going to schedule in groups of departments for council members to come. That way, each department can schedule, we'll have, and I'll send out what that might look like, so that we can do some group meetings and have opportunities in advance.
Right.
So,
So Mayor and Doug, is there a means to, through this process this year, to establish a case scenario to then educate our local
Oh.
representatives at the
in terms
state
of
level?
Public integration into the process, definitely.
well, he's talking at the state level.
Oh, the state level, okay.
Well, the 389 bill, obviously, people have tried to stay, entities have tried to stay under the 3%
Right.
rate, or some automatically take it. The issue I see is 389 seems to be driving the need to go to that raise, so it's a penalty tax where one segment of society is not carrying the load for those who have been in the city for a multitude of years. And I feel like some way we need to communicate to the legislative side of life, here's the reality. We've been living with it for now 3 years. I think it's roughly 3 years, isn't
Completely
it?
support that process, because you're exactly right. What's happened is they say, let's take the money away from new construction and redistribute it to the rest of the city, but then at the same time, that redistribution of the new monies forces us to have to apply for the 3%, which pushes them back up. And it's unintended consequences that are not delivering the intended result of the legislation.
Right?
Well, the intent was to penalize cities to continue to annex and grow.
So that's,
And
That's the
so
bottom line.
it is penalizing, but the reality is what the people need to know is it's penalizing those who have been here for 15, 20
Yeah.
years.
exactly.
And
Yeah.
it's done by the legislative branch.
If
and-
we could find a way to do that, I would. We've tried and will continue to try, but I would love to engage with anybody in the state who would be willing to engage in a discussion, because it's like going to the end of the hose and pinching it off and expecting that to solve the problem at the beginning of the well, because the problem is not how big the hose is. The problem is the legislation that took place in 2016 that started changing the indexing, and that started changing the fact where real estate increases in residential property taxes were far outstripping the real estate increases in commercial. Let me give you a quick example. The Walmart down on 12th and Greenhurst, whatever it is down there, 10 years ago they paid over $312,000 in property taxes. Last year I think they paid $160,000. So they're paying less, the residents are paying more. That's the legislative impact that's really driving us a little crazy.
And we are out of time. Those are really good comments, David. And, it's difficult. Candidly, I don't have, I hate to say this, but I don't have any hope that we can make any change because you have to have a listening body to do so. And at this time, we don't. I'll be very candid. It's not there. So I'm not sure what to do about it. What's sad is that then the shift is now municipalities are taking forward, right? There's somehow it has to all work. And so anyway.
Yeah.
So Doug, thank you.
Thank you, Council Mayor.
We welcome input from council. And I say that in that, as we all know, it is council's responsibility to set budget. So we want to ensure that the council has a say and that what we bring forward is a really good representation of actual needs. One thing about the budget process from Doug's standpoint and from every department standpoint is transparency. We want to be extremely transparent. We want to do the best we can to be good stewards of what we have. And sometimes it's hard to try to figure it out. It just gets really challenging. Sometimes you want to go, I hate this season, because it is so hard to try to figure it out.
It's shooting at a moving target.
It's very difficult, and it has become more difficult. One thing I will say that I really appreciate, Doug, a couple of years ago, set money aside in a contingency because he knew that was going this direction. And because of that, we've been in a place that we've been able to sustain, and we still have some of that contingency, but it's almost gone. When it's gone, then it's really challenging. The difficulty is we are fighting for employees. We lost an employee this week that went to the private sector. We lose employees that go to the other municipalities. When they're raising they're doing the increases and we're not. We can't keep the employees to run the city. And as we all know, we're the largest full-service city, with the exception of fire, the largest public works department, because the other ones aren't dealing with that. Those are enterprise different funds, but it's a mix, and it's really challenging to have good morale, good service, and we're working diligently to achieve those, and we will continue to. And we're trying to be innovative, and our staff here knows we talk about it all the time. We need to be innovative. We've got to think of, we don't want to do the same thing the way we've always been doing it. We need to think of new ways to do it. And so we're trying to figure out how to do that. And so we welcome the ideas, but what's most important is that we provide to you, council, a good budget that you feel good about, because that is what your responsibility is, and we want to support you in your role. So we welcome your comments, your concerns, and we will do our best to present something to you that is good for you to work with. So thank you. Doug, thank you.
Thank you very much.
So the next item is the allocation of the sports fields, and I believe we have a presentation online, and I think it's ready to go, and so we'll step into that. And then, of course, I think, Rodney, hopefully you guys had the discussion about the likelihood we may or may not. Doug, we're so glad you're here, but we may or may not get there. We'll see. So thank you.
All right.
Good morning, Darren.
Yeah, good morning, Mayor and Council. Today we have a presentation. Beej Johnson is our recreation manager, and he does all the allocation for our open space in our parks, mainly sports. And so for today, he's just going to go over some of the challenges, some of the changes that we're seeing on how we allocate field space. It's a tough job because there's always more requests than we have space for. And so we don't expect to solve all of our problems today, but we want to make sure that you're aware of some of the issues that are going on in the community and how we're addressing them.
Good morning, Mayor, Council. Beej Johnson, Recreation Manager for the record. So I'm going to give an overview of our process on ball field allocation and then the big dilemma that's going on in youth sports specifically. So the process is youth sports and adult sports organizations fill out an athletic facility use permit form. So they fill out an application to us. It's submitted to recreation staff, AKA this guy. And then after review, I will allocate field space based on our recreation athletic use policy. A little purpose and philosophy, and this is in our policy as well. And so we organize or align ourselves with organizations that have a similar philosophy to ours. And so establishing partnerships with groups and permittees following a similar philosophy, offering a healthy environment for all participants and spectators, learn basic skills, have a positive experience. Winning comes second. Every action taken should be based first on what is best for the well-being and skill development of our participants. And as it relates to allocating fields to community permittees, preference will be given to groups sharing a healthy philosophy that emphasize positive behavior and good sportsmanship. And as all of you have heard over the years, that hasn't always been the greatest thing going on in youth sports is good sportsmanship. So our priorities are based on these 5 categories. Category A is any City of Nampa sponsored, Parks and Rec sponsored activity is first. And then second is any Nampa school district activity. So for us, we allocate field space to Nampa High softball at West Park, Skyview softball at Skyview Park, and then Skyview soccer at Skyview Park as well. So both of those 2 high schools use our facilities as a joint use agreement with the district and the city. And this is where we get into the nitty-gritty. So category B is Nampa-based, nonprofit athletic permittees. So basically, they're no cut. It's a rec league. And our big ones are Nampa Babe Ruth, Nampa Premier Soccer, Nampa Valley Little League, and Canyon County Optimist Football. Category C is other Nampa-based, and again, these are all Nampa-based organizations. Nonprofit, including but not limited to youth or adult athletic leagues that are travel or club teams, scouts, church groups, and service clubs. Category D are other Nampa-based club teams that are for-profit. And believe it or not, there are for-profit youth sports organizations, and they're category D. And then category E is any non-resident, so anybody that's not a Nampa-based organization. So there is a shift in the landscape of youth sports, specifically rec league versus club sports. So in the past, our allocation was pretty simple. We had Nampa Babe Ruth, we had Nampa Valley Little League, we had soccer group, and then us and the school district, and that was really about it. So currently, there has been a dramatic shift since 2020, since COVID, that the number of club teams and club organizations that are applying and using our facilities has increased dramatically. So here's the dilemma. The dilemma is that, right? We have more and more club organizations that are applying for field space. And even some of our traditional rec leagues are expanding their boundaries outside of Nampa to capture numbers, because their numbers are going down because those kids are now going to play club sports, or they're deciding to go to another rec league that's not Nampa based, but they want to use Nampa facilities. They might be Nampa kids, but they're playing in a league that is not Nampa based, but they want to use Nampa facilities. So that's the big dilemma that we're facing at Parks and Recreation. So other municipalities are facing the same thing. We all basically allocate field space the same way. Boise's a little different. They have more facilities, and so they're able to create revenue. Speaking of that, any of our affiliate programs, we do not charge field space. Because they're Nampa taxpayers, we don't charge them dollars. If they are a for-profit organization that want to use our facilities, we do charge them for field space.
So a clarification, Mayor. So Beej, I wrote a note here, so I just want to clarify why you mentioned it. So non-Nampa groups or money revenue groups are being charged for use of fields?
If I allocate field space to them, then yes, they are being charged a fee per field, per hour.
And rate-wise, is that something that can increase, or?
Yes, with approval of council. We currently have a rate of $10 per field per hour, which can increase based on council's approval.
Yeah, that needs to go way up, from my perspective. If they're non-resident and groups using our fields, and we're going to think about max increase on property tax and foregone, we need to think about how we're user fee charging non-Nampa groups and citizens from my side. Otherwise, me as a resident, I'm subsidizing somebody's play coming from a different area to use Nampa fields.
Councilor Bills, and that's one of the big dilemmas that I have and the conversations I have, because I'll have organizations and or teams from mostly Ada County-based groups that will want to use facilities, and I let them know the process, and they want to argue with me that I should be able to, that their organization should be able to rent the fields, and I say you can if there's field space available, but currently we have enough demand with Nampa-based organizations that there's just not the space available for. The other issue is that because there's no Nampa buy-in, the relationships aren't built, and so they tend to use a facility, for lack of a better term, ruin it, right? They don't put it to bed, and then they leave, and then we're holding the bag, right?
Yeah.
And we're like, well, that didn't work very well.
Yeah. I mean, if they rent, I think we got to be getting considerably more, and we need to be wise about use of the asset. If it's sitting, it's one thing, but still, from a straight tax and revenue point of view, if we got outside groups, outside people, they live elsewhere, they don't pay tax here, and they come and just use a field for $10, that's just so under, cost and et cetera, from my perspective.
So my guess is that we would all agree with that. So with that, you might come back with a recommendation of what that fee should be, but I think I'm hearing you say is that we don't have fields available for them to use. But let's talk about that. What is the primary question you want to get at today?
Mayor Kling, so here's some possible solutions. So this is exactly
Which has to do with allocation.
Allocation of field space, really for our Nampa-based organization. So here's some possible solutions. So we either restrict who can actually apply. If they're a Nampa-based rec league, they can only apply. It's only available for a rec league, so no club teams can apply. It only is rec, so that's one possible solution. Another one is, and this would be a very heavy lift, just want to get that out front, require all applicants to supply names and addresses of participants and base allocation on Nampa residency, and charge player fees to non-resident, right? So like a non-resident fee, but call it a player fee to non-resident participants. That could be a very heavy lift because we do have a lot of participants that have Nampa addresses, but they may live in the county. They may not be City of Nampa residents. So again, to come through, for example, Nampa Babe Ruth has 1,200 kids, and to come through that would be a very heavy lift for recreation staff to administer. Option 3 or solution 3 is Nampa-based rec leagues. We don't charge them to use fields, but all club teams would pay a usage rate to be determined by the City of Nampa. So to me, I equate that as you can choose to have your child or your grandchildren or whoever play in a club league or a club team, but to me it's like choosing for your student or your child to go to a private school, right? You can do it, it's your choice, but there's a fee associated with that. Or option number 4 is we stay as is and we just continue to allocate how we allocate.
Mayor Kling.
Yes.
So in meeting with the Babe Ruth officials here in Nampa, they don't pay anything because they're Nampa-based. However, they are helping the city because they maintain their own baseball fields. And so does Optimus Football. But that one is also based out of Boise. So those Boise teams come here to Nampa to play at no charge, apparently. There's not an agreement between the city of Nampa and Optimus Football that plays in the Treasure Valley area. So I'm not sure how that's going to work if you start charging these other ones, which I think you should. But so I'm going to be real careful with maintaining that line of opportunity for the kids to play in active sports and with the parents. I do agree with Councilman Bills that those outside Nampa-based should pay a higher fee, but I'm going to be real careful with that as well. An example would be Optimus Football or Inferno Soccer. They are based out of Caldwell, and they play here too. So that's a tough one, Beach. I'm going to lean on you for this one.
Councilman Rodriguez, so the difference between baseball and then the soccer community and the football community is this. So baseball, like Nampa Babe Ruth, they have enough teams internally that they play each other. There has been a shift in Nampa Babe Ruth in how they conduct their league now. So they have a rec side and they have a competitive side. So they have what's called a select side. So that's basically pre-all-star. So it's kids that want to play more competitive baseball, but it's not club baseball. And so they try out in the winter to make the select team. They play a select league in the spring. Right now, Michigan Youth Baseball at Settlers Park hosts those games. But the rec side, they all play internally. So everything is done internally with Nampa Babe Ruth at Stampede or Les Goodman. So the fields I've allocated, or Optimus, the bigger field at Optimus Park. So they do that internally. Soccer and football don't do that. So this is what you're referring to is, so Canyon County Optimus Football has their own league, but they don't have enough teams to play each other internally. They then play teams from Boise, Mountain Home, Idaho City, Melba, et cetera, Middleton, et cetera. So yes, teams from outside the area are playing our Nampa-based teams in Nampa at Optimus Field. I will say Optimus Football does not, they don't pay us anything to maintain, they don't maintain that facility themselves. Nampa Babe Ruth does. Right. They've invested dollars into servicing ball fields, making sure that those fields are playable and good. They've done a really good job of that. And so soccer is the same model as football, where there's not enough teams on the rec side necessarily play each other internally, although they do have 84 teams this year. But there's teams from Middleton, Eagle, Ada County, and the rest of Canyon County that come to CWI and play each other on the rec side. On their competitive side, again, they got teams from all over the valley coming into Nampa to play. So football and soccer, that's their model. Baseball has enough kids, they play internally. The other baseball league that is our affiliate is Nampa Valley Little League. There's been a dramatic shift in their numbers as well. Traditionally, their home has been Optimus Park. They have reduced, they're just doing T-ball and rookie ball. Most of those kids have shifted to Nampa Bay Ruth, so their numbers have grown. And so, and again, club numbers have blossomed, we'll say, significantly. The challenge is that we have club teams that spin off of Babe Ruth, and then there's an internal conflict with that club team, and then there's another spin-off of another club team, and now you got these two club teams that are Nampa-based that now are arguing with each other because they used to be on the same team. So there's spin-off of spin-off of spin-offs. It's a challenge.
So Beach, Sebastian is on hold. And we'll have Sebastian have his question, and then Councilman Haverfield. Okay. Sebastian, are you there?
Yes, I am. Thank you, Mayor. Mine's not a question. Mine's a recommendation that we move, not a motion, but I would say that for these club leagues that they should be required to pay unless they're a rec league. I think it's just a cost of doing business. It's something that, unfortunately, for us, I hope they don't go to another city or municipality that says, we won't charge you a fee. But this is just the reality. It costs to maintain, it costs to upkeep, and we should expect those club teams who are collecting those fees either way from those parents. I know it increases it. That's unfortunate, but that's just the cost of doing sports and being involved in a club. So I think option 3 would be our best route.
Thank you, Sebastian. Councilman Haverfield.
Thank you, Mayor. I was just going back in my mind 20 plus years ago when I was involved with the Babe Ruth program and Optimus football myself as a coach, and then later as actually running the Babe Ruth Association as president there. I think that's how David and I actually met, was he reached out to me on a pocket park over at Park Ridge because he wanted to put a baseball field there to help the programs. So this has been an ongoing issue for years. When I was dealing with Gene Weaver and Alan Saba, asking for more play fields, places for our kids to practice and actually play. The new dynamic that you have is the club ball. But I understand the Legion programs have suffered with participation because of the club baseball that's come about. And then it sounds like the Little League was, again, they were at odds as far as having available space, but since they've dropped back down, it's gone back to Babe Ruth. So I am all for trying to help the Babe Ruth program and the Optimus football, as long as it's Nampa-based kids, because we're helping the Parks and Rec Department, or they're helping now the Parks and Rec Department with running programs that you don't have to staff. It's people that are volunteers, and it's a volunteer organization. So I really believe strongly in helping our kids have not only opportunity to play, but to have good places to play at. So, and again, back to the Midway Park, when David and I were able to be involved with that was kind of a labor of love for me, because all those years of trying to, get more places to play for those kids, it came about with Midway. And as it expands and provides more opportunity, unfortunately for the neighbors around there, like Rick Youngblood, he doesn't want to see all the traffic, but again, the opportunity for us to be able, as a city, to provide recreational opportunities for our kids should be paramount.
Thank you, Councilman Haverfield.
I think, thank you for your comments. I think one of the things that would help us is the comfort level from the city council as we collect information and collect addresses. And so how we're getting the information is say, okay, how many kids are from Nampa? And them knowing that we're possibly going to be favorable to Nampa kids, we're not sure we're getting the accurate information from the leagues. And so I think it's important that we be, I hate to be too intrusive, but I think that we need to be more diligent in getting, addresses and where we're able to verify some of the information that they're given to make sure that we are serving the Nampa kids.
The challenge is that we have a lot of Nampa addresses that are not in the city of Nampa, so they're not contributing. And then the effort it takes to do the research, you would have to literally be going in and doing a search on those addresses to find out if they actually are city of Nampa or not. That's a heavy lift. And is that the highest and best use of our time? So is there an easier way to accomplish that without the labor intensiveness? So really going to the leadership of that league, if it's, and maybe it's the proportionate number. I mean, I don't know. That's a difficult one. I'm just thinking about how much work it
Yeah, and I
takes.
think, I think Beach might have alluded to it, is you might have a club team that calls themselves a Nampa team, and there's 2 Nampa people on it, but the rest of them are coming from, different parts of, of the county. So they say they're in Nampa, and the coach might even be a Nampa resident, but maybe 80 or 90% of the participants aren't, because they're recruiting, trying to get the best team to be the most competitive they can in some of the club sports. And so,
Thank you.
there's certainly some challenges. I think having the information so you can double check, and make sure that keep people honest about the information that they're providing might be helpful.
So Sebastian did put in the chat that he's supportive of number 3, solution number 3, which is Nampa-based rec leagues, no charge to use the fields, and club teams do pay a field usage rate that is determined by the city of Nampa. So that was Sebastian's suggestion. Does anybody else have any comments? I would like to give you some direction today if we can. And so I guess I would ask 2 questions. One, does council feel like they have enough information to make a decision today, or is there further information you're needing so that we can move forward?
So Mayor, I think we have the information. I think from my side, it should be somewhat of a tiered deal. It's not a 1, 2, or 3 only situation. I think it's a priority issue, and the priority is Nampa Rec leagues should take the priority, and then from there, I personally believe we should do name and address checks. I think in our day and age with the technology and the programming and apps that are out there, we certainly are able to do a lot of that on other parts of society. It seems like we should be able to do that and not have too much difficulty getting that forward. And I think the club teams and the rec teams, they need to get paid, but $10 a hour usage on a fee, I think it should be 100 easily. And if somebody balks at it, say, well, fine, understand, go use another field. Well, we don't have another field. That's exactly right. Nampa taxpayers are subsidizing your recreation, adult recreation. And I just think we need to come to the table. We're behind the 8 ball from my perspective.
Okay. Any other comments?
Just a clarification. Is it the taxpayers that are, or is it the rec budget that receives from the members of the rec center or the parks?
Councilman Rodriguez, so recreation and the rec center, we're 2 different divisions.
Okay, that's
So
what I wanted to clarify.
recreation is tax dollars. Rec center is obviously a special revenue fund. Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
So, David, I think what I hear you saying is it's number 3. However, with that, you would like us to the best of their ability be checking addresses.
Yeah, I think it's a combination. I think
Of the
there's
2
a
and 3.
tier situation.
So we'll
2 and 3.
Okay, so we'll have to see how we can implement that, because it is still, every address that comes in has to somehow be in a system and searched. So, yes.
Madam
correct.
Mayor, Councilmember Griffin put in a comment. His first question was, how hard was it to do a county or city map search? And then he was questioning, if one employee sat down with all the applications, how many hours would it take to search 1,200 houses?
But we do that for elections, right?
Well, but
We know-
And that's, and
not at the
Councilman,
city, the county,
Councilman-
we don't have to.
No, but we should be able to.
Councilman Bills, that was my point as well. I know that the clerk's office has to do that, and that's why I commented on you, Shar, just going through the process. If we had the system pulled up on a computer and we had a green stamp and a red stamp and just typed in an address and saw the boundary, no, they're outside, red stamp, green stamp. I'm sure it'll take maybe a minute That's what I don't know, and that's why I ask on Shark, because she has to do some of these searches just through the clerk's office. How difficult would that be if you had all the applications organized, the address is right on the top, to go through 1,200 applications and just mark them green or red? And I know that's oversimplifying, and I apologize, but I don't see it as a huge lift other than maybe 15 hours for one individual to go through.
So, Madam Mayor, Councilmember Griffin, I just want to clarify one thing. It's just not a matter of a simple search. Because of all the enclaves, we basically would be doing 2 searches per address.
So I think that we can, and Rodney may be able to chime in too. I think with our GIS system, we can enter an address and it'll bring up whether it's in the county or in the city. So, you know, it would take some time, but I don't know if it is a deal breaker to be able to do some searches. You know, you can go through quite a few addresses if you get an admin person that's quick at it. So,
Mayor
but
Clean.
I think we have the tools for the city to do it.
Yes, and just a real quick, Natalie had sent a chat, and she said that the NAMPA, her recommendation is number 3, NAMPA verified teams to charge outside, no charge, excuse me, outside club teams need to pay, and she agrees that we need to increase the fee.
Madam
So
Mayor.
it's the same, I think. Okay, so Councilman Rodriguez and then Councilman Reynolds.
Okay, this is getting way out left field here. I don't know that we need to do the address check. That's just way too much. But I do agree that we need to increase the fee up to $100 for out of city. However, I also would like for you to, have you contacted any of the club presidents just to see what their thought is? If you're going to increase it to them, they're going to be ones that's going to bear the dollar, which I'm okay with, but I wondered if they have any input.
Councilmember Rodriguez, I have not talked to the club side. I've talked to the rec league side, so the Babe Ruth and the Optimus football side and soccer. So those 3 specifically I've talked to. I've not talked to the club side because there's the sheer numbers, frankly.
Yeah, I know.
You know, we went from 1 or 2 clubs in the past to, I mean, there's 22 organizations that I allocate field space to, and 17 or 18 of them are club organizations.
Are they okay with an increase, or are they balk? I know they're going to balk.
Yeah, they're intended being ball fields and baseball. Yes, they're going to balk, right? Because you know, whatever they have to pay, they're going to pass on to their players. I mean, it's just going to be the cost of doing business for their club organization. So, yes, they're going to balk.
One of the problems that we have is Rodeo Park. Here you have Napa School District and the City of Napa and the American Legion, and nothing's getting done out there. And they need something, we need to help or do something with Rodeo Park to make it better, and maintain the fields, but we can't. And so that's another issue all by itself.
Correct. We haven't even, this isn't even addressed rodeo. This is just the 22 other ball fields that, you know, the city maintains and manages.
Okay, Councilman Reynolds?
Madam Mayor, so my thoughts are is that the club teams are in a whole league of their own. I think we need to see a chart with local teams like baseball, whatever it may be. I don't know all the local teams, but we need to see a chart there and have a fee structure for that. And club teams is a whole nother bracket, because parents that pay to have their kid play on a club team, they're not opposed to paying fees, higher fees. They're traveling all over the place playing. So I think we should have that club. I'd like to see a chart that shows us the club team as one column and all the local rec stuff as another. And I don't think the addresses should come into play. That seems like a real task that we don't need to address. But we can solve that by changing the fee structure based off a local Nampa team and a club team.
So just, I know you're saying you'd like to see a chart, but my guess is this is a time-sensitive discussion because are you wanting to implement it this year?
Mayor, no, I've already allocated. I allocate field space in February. So
What
this
about the
discussion.
charge?
Pardon me?
What about the charge? When are you wanting to
It would
implement a
be for
charge?
next fiscal year. So I'm getting way ahead of it right now, so I can start having, if the city goes in that direction, I can start having conversations with those club coaches, club presidents, so that they are fully aware of what's going on. So I'm a whole year ahead of.
Okay, because of that, I'd like to go ahead and see if we can get over to our planning and zoning presentation, if we could take an extra 15 minutes. If that's how long it would take. I think I may pause on 1.3, but with that, could you bring back to City Council just the chart that Councilman Reynolds suggested? Let's and I think what you're hearing is, I think there's a strong support for number 3. It isn't a final decision, since we don't have to make a decision today, but there's strong support for that. And so I think it would be good to see the chart of the allocation of fields, how many are rec leagues, what field usage is still allowable for club teams, and what that recommended rate might be. David Bills did mention $100. I don't know if that was an hour or a night. So let's come back and readdress it one more time, but I think you got some good initial input. So it is just to make sure, okay, real quickly, yeah.
Yeah, I would just suggest that you go back to each one of the organizations that are utilizing the facilities, put the residency requirements on them. On the onboarding process of each one of the players, they do have to put their information anyway, so it's already available in the onboarding process. So just put it back on the organizations, whether it's Babe Ruth or Optimus Football, all of them would be able to provide you with that information. You don't have to, Councilman Griffin's point, hire someone or have someone on staff do that. You could have the organizations do it for you.
Mayor Clayton, Councilman Haverfield, that we in the application process, we ask them to do that. I think what Dan was alluding to is that it's an honor system. We don't know especially on the club side. Nampa Babe Ruth, as you know, there's specific boundaries that kids have to play in with Babe Ruth, the rec side. And so that one's easy. I mean, they could tell me exactly who's a resident, who's not. Optimus Football, same thing. Nampa Premier Soccer, same thing. It's the club side that there's no residency requirement. So that would be the challenge.
And that separates them from the normal organizations that you've dealt with over the past. So that's, again, I mean, it's a new dynamic you're dealing with, sure. But, you know, as far as some of those requirements could be taken care of by the organizers of those.
If you would take all of this into consideration, I do want to pause here because this is not an immediate thing, and I feel like if we've had, Council, could you give us another 10 or 15 minutes so we could go ahead and work through planning and zoning? Beach, thank you so much. Just bring back, a little bit more information. I think you've got it. Great job. Thank you for allowing the council to give input here. Thank you. Okay, Council, I'd like to ask if we could postpone our President Pro Tem discussion to another time. You have the information in your packet. I don't know if this is a 5-minute discussion, but I'd like to skip and go over to long-range planning. And as long as we've had teams sitting here all morning, I'd like to go ahead. How long do you think you need, Doug? Okay, that's great. Thank you so much. Thank you for waiting. I'd like to give you the opportunity to share with us since you've been waiting so long. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor and Council, Doug Critchfield
Yes.
with the Planning and Zoning Department. I'm going to share with you just a brief overview of this last year, of what we've accomplished this last year and what's coming up. So for the new council members, perhaps that were not involved with this, we completed a specific area plan for Highway 16 area, and that included the land uses and some specific details about this area. We also completed a specific area plan for the Highway 2026 area. It's about 5,000 acres on the north end of Nampa.
And Doug, where can they find those? If they would like to dig a little deeper into it, where can they find those?
Yes, so those are on our website, and if you go to Nampa Planning and Zoning and go to Future Planning, that's in the, can't remember the title, but there are plan sets that are available there. So, thank you, Mayor. And then we also completed an area of city impact expansion. This took about 2.5 years to complete, quite a bit of work on the ground. And this is the area of area of impact that we added to the city, and also the future land use designations that came with that. This is important for us in that it allows us to define the development that's moving westward at this time. We just had a minor change to the agricultural to very low density residential in our land use designation. Nothing else in that changed, and that was really important that we made that change so it's more clear with the county in our negotiations with them of what the two land uses mean.
And just a reminder, Doug,
Yes.
if you could share with us what very low density residential is.
Yes, very low density residential is 1 acre and above, and it's generally more open space and rural type of feel. There is an option in that land use designation for a cluster development with smaller lots, but a large open space area that's attached to that would be part of that development. It's similar to the Harris Ranch type of development that you see in Boise. So there are a couple options in that land use designation.
Thank you.
You bet. And that covers these green areas on the map. So up near the Boise River and down near Lake Lowell are those areas.
Can I ask a quick question, Mayor?
Yes, certainly.
So Doug, on the map, the far west, L-shaped, low-density area,
Yes.
what was the reason to go out a couple of miles there to the west?
Yeah, Mayor, Councilmember Bills, this area was undefined. Caldwell has their area of impact just to the north of this area, but we had agreed to these boundaries many, many years ago. We just had not extended this area until recently. Yeah, we had tried to do that back in 2016, but it was decided at that time we didn't want to extend that far. This last go around, we felt it would be prudent for us to define this area within our area of impact. Again, just so that it's not an undefined area in the county as these two communities come together. So, thank you. You bet. And then we did some scoping and contracting with some of the plans that are coming up, and I'll just go through those real quickly. So our Southwest Napa specific area plan is underway. This project provides greater definition as the other two specific area plans have. The area is it's not quite the entire area that we brought into our area of impact, but it's pretty close, and it's really trying to define the area around Midway Park and where the potential new school sites are for the Nampa School District, the high school and an elementary school site. This area is starting to grow. We have development interests in this area, and we wanted to help them and help the city define what would be happening. So we're working on that project currently. That'll be completed in September of this year. The city council involvement, there'll be a public open house, and there'll also be a joint workshop with Canyon County Board of County Commissioners and the P&Z Commission to review the draft plan on this.
So can I ask a quick question?
Yes. Ma'am.
So that says city council involvement. So public open house, joint workshop with city council also?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
just wanting to make sure.
Oh, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. And so right now, Kittleson and Associates is working with us on this project. We're working on a downtown Nampa implementation plan, which essentially will bring all of the plans that we have for downtown under one plan. We have just received proposals back for that, and we'll be working with Councilmember Bills and Councilmember Haverfield and the committee to review those. And Mayor, I believe that you'll be involved as well.
Thank you for having council involved in that.
You bet.
Thank you.
Thank you. So this implementation plan, if all proceeds, it should be about a 10-month plan to pull all that together. That'll be early next year that we'll have that complete. We're working on a joint powers agreement in coordination with Canyon County. This is an old agreement that we've had since 2005. It needs updating. We're working with the county right now on updating that joint powers agreement. We're going to make some progress, we think, on a tiered approach to development and review of those developments, rather than the approach that we have now, which is just the county giving great weight to our decision or to our comments. That we're working with the county to try and tie that a little bit closer to our comprehensive plan, especially within about a mile radius of city limits. So we're in process. We don't know when that will come forward, but we'll keep you informed as we move forward with that on those negotiations. We're planning for a 2050 comp plan update that will probably be starting here in October, November of this year to start that update. We've drafted a scope on the project, and we've delineated what we think will be the budget for this. And we're working on data collection. We're also working on updating the 2040 strategies that were in that plan to see what it is that we've completed of those strategies and where we are with the remaining strategies. So we're working with the departments on gathering that information, and we'll present that to you.
And Doug, you might mention the work that we did that we began, I think it was in 2020, because we had our 2035 plan, I think it was, and that took several years, but the one that we updated, there were a lot of strategies in that plan, and we reduced them, I don't remember by how much, but considerably.
We did, yes.
Which was a really great exercise. And so thank you so much for going back and reviewing and giving consideration to when we brought them all down and reduced the number, and then what did we get done? That will be a great report out. Thank you for that.
You bet, Mayor. Thank you. This new plan will be modeled somewhat after Pocatello's or Idaho Falls plan. It's going to be more visual, and it's going to have really 6 to 8 major goals that we'd like for the community to establish that we can work on. And so it'll be very achievable and user-friendly, if you will. And then we're just real quickly, we're working with Compass on the developing the trail system underneath Highway 16 in the Waterways District. It's a grant program that's being done by Compass and led by Public Works, and we're involved with that. The downtown Nampa parking study is underway, and economic development is leading that, and we're acting in an advisory role. The old Nampa neighborhood grant project. These are funds to help those who live in the old Nampa neighborhoods to determine if they want to be on the National Register for Historic Places and if they'd like to be part of a local historic district. And Bree, who is with me here, is working with economic development on that project. And then lastly, we're working with Valley Regional Transit. They're doing a study on the Nampa Caldwell Boulevard. They have a $150,000 grant to collect data and do some site analysis on improving the transportation corridor in that area from Caldwell all the way down to 16th Street here in Nampa.
Are you working with Mark Stour on that?
Yes, I'm working with Mark, but we're also working directly with VRT on this.
What I want to make sure is the left hand and the right hand know what we're doing, because Mark is our lead communication to VRT, so he should be really involved. I know he's really busy right now with the transportation bond, but I just want to make sure that we are linking, that we don't have two separate communications going on, that he's really involved in that.
Great. Thank you so much, Mayor.
Thank you.
Appreciate that. And that's the end of my report. So.
Well, I tell you what, Doug, you do such great work. Thank you. And this was really informative. I'm glad that we took a few minutes today. Council, do you have any questions? One thing that I do know for everyone, if you have a question, Doug is more than happy to walk you through this. Take a few minutes. If you were not involved in those initial plans, those were great plans. I think most of us here were really great plans. The area-specific plans, the approach that direction, doing the area-specific plans was excellent. And I really appreciate the work that went into that, because I think that it helps us to drill down. So really good job.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Right.
Thank you. So council, are you okay with pausing and bringing back this item 1.3 at a later time? I do apologize. I don't know that it's really time sensitive, and since we ran over today, we're 10 minutes over. If that's okay, we'll put it on our next workshop.
Just for info, I'm okay with the concept. I'm not sure I saw a document to read, but so concept-wise.
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Bills, there was some information in your packet.
I think it was this document. Yeah.
But
I missed.
you were correct. There wasn't a staff memo or anything. It was just providing information.
Just which cities, you've got Boise, Eagle, Meridian, Moscow, that all use, whether they name it a president pro tem or a vice president, the larger cities have a tendency to have that secondary position in place.
And Madam
so-
Mayor, I would be more than happy to put this on the April 1st meeting if you'd like. I do have some information from City Code on those 4 cities of exactly what the council president pro tem or vice president, what their responsibilities are. The reason why I was bringing this forward is we are going to be amending the code regarding the term of the council president. This is in the same section, so I thought it might be best if we at least review at the same time. Yes.
At the same time. I think that's great, and so if you wanted to even send it out to council, the information, send it via email, the backup that was in this packet, plus the new information, and then it'll also be in the April 1 packet, but it'll give you guys an opportunity to review, and then we'll be able to move quickly on that when we get to April 1. Okay. If it pleases the
motion to
council,
adjourn.
thank you.
Second.
We're adjourned, thank you.